Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform dedicated to sharing breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the meats industry. On each episode, we will hear from meat specialists and professionals to talk about numerous topics in meat science, including animal welfare, meat production, meat quality, food safety, and so much more.
Hello, meat folks. Good morning. This is Francisco Najar. I'm your co-host today. We have an amazing guest that I would like, before I jump on this topic, because I think that I'm very excited since previously we touched on retail, we touched on meat waste, and I think this is going to be a good conversation. Dr. Bass, I'm excited about this. How about you?
I'm excited as usual, Francisco. And yes, this is a very exciting discussion that we're about to have. Even though we haven't had it, I am excited because we have with us the one and only Kari Underly. And if you don't know of Kari Underly, shame on you, because there's so much to be learned from this individual. Her and I had a chance to work briefly together for a number of years back. Serendipitously, the timing couldn't be better because of Kari's movements to bring meat cutting to the forefront, bringing retail expertise back to the forefront yet again, and that's kind of a big movement right now in the United States, is to get butchers trained again, and that's what Kari Underly is really working hard to do. And so, first off, Kari, thank you for joining us today.
Wow, well, what an introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk some butchery and meat action here.
yeah. Well, so let's just go right into it. And Kari, you've started the Range Meat Academy. So can you tell our listeners about what that is, what it brings, and how they can get a hold of this really cool resource?
Yeah, so probably about 5 years ago, I wrote the book of The Art of Beef Cutting, and I was asked frequently about if there were other tools besides this book, and did I have them for other proteins. And so I took a step back, and I've been fortunate enough to create a lot of collateral for the industry. And so when I looked at my files, I'm like, wow, I need to get all this down onto an online version before online was cool, pre-COVID, right? And so we produced our school. We produced all the content. It's so Range Meat Academy is an online platform, and we are a vocational trade school, and we have been approved by the Illinois Board of Higher Education to operate as a private business vocational school. So that was a big a good pat on my own back, if I would say. It was quite an accomplishment for us to get that approval, and we're very proud. So, one of the challenges with meat education is a lot of folks aren't around big cities where they have access and exposure, to get that kind of training. And so what's really unique about this, because it's online, that students, farmers, we've got a lot of different folks on the platform, can learn from their own home, as long as they have a pretty good internet connection, so they can do all the pre-work. I call it like the pre-apprenticeship, and so they can do it from their own home.
I think it was from my experience, I was teaching my last couple of years. K-State was teaching the animal slaughter class, where we harvest beef, pork, sheep, and then we have the transformation as well, teaching undergrads how to do that. And a lot of them were after they graduate, they go back to the farm and they want to learn how to cut meat. And I think one of the resources that we had was your book. So it was the first one of the first exposure to your book, and getting to know more about meat cutting, so that we can transmit that information to students. But I love what you do on the industry side. I also, you're promoting education, you're promoting excellent training on meat cutting. And I got just one thing that you'll be the best to answer this. What are the misconceptions or the main questions from small meat processors that they come to you like, okay, I want to learn this, or I wish I knew about this topic? I don't know. I think it's very general, but I think it's going to help us understand some of what you face on a daily basis when it comes to that training, what the regular things that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, so we get a lot of requests from all different places, all over the world. You know, we have students all over the world. We have a lot of meat processors that are looking to learn how to do it themselves. I think with the expansion of local meat industry specifically, that was kind of a driver for this, is that folks were looking to figure out how to do this whole carcass when they've been exposed to, you know, a lot of boxed meat. And so meat processors were also looking to figure out how they could add more to their beef than just, you know, chuck roast, arm roast, round steak, you know, just kind of the basics. So they're really looking for a more in-depth knowledge and that they could do it themselves. We have meat processors that are on the program that use this training for their employees. So, you know, that's I think that's pretty cool. I was excited to do that. As you guys mentioned, I'm kind of a meat geek, a recovering retailer, I like to say. and so to see other industries come into play and trying to add those different cuts is really important. So schools is another group of folks that have been coming to want to learn. So we have 3 junior colleges using the curriculum now. And what they're trying to do is pair the online learning with the students. And then once they complete certain levels, then they go forward and get paired up with a meat processor in their state. And the one area, well, I'm excited about all the areas, but the one thing that I'm really getting excited about is the Native American population. And they're really working hard to advance local agriculture, you know, in their areas. And so we're working with Mesa Lands Junior College, Technical College in New Mexico. And he's going out and training different groups. And so that just, you know, that really excites me, you know, being able to impact local economies and groups that may have been, I don't want to say overlooked, but I don't know how to say it a different way. Maybe you could help me out. But
well, you know, you're getting the message out there in a very affordable format, and that's one of the big challenges about teaching meat cutting. And Kari, you know this. Francisco knows this. Some of the biggest expense is just being able to have the facility and the product to be able to do the repetition and go through all that. But sometimes we just need to have the basics and learn some of the basics. And that's what Range Meat Academy can bring, is to expose folks to all the different major meat species, the different cuts that are available, and then using, I assume you would use the art of beef cutting. I'm holding the book up right now for those who are driving and can't see the book, but I'm holding the book up right now. And I love this because the images are amazing. And the thing that made me so excited about this is that you do take a contemporary approach to fabrication. It's not, like you said, it's not just the old 7-bone roast and the arm roast and things like that. You are breaking down these beef carcasses in that book, and then I assume in the other species for Range Meat Academy, when you have the online versions, you're looking at a more contemporary approach to merchandising that meat so that it's much more accessible and easier to understand for the consumer that is ultimately going to be eating that. And so that's something that we have to continue to remind our processors, is that maybe because we've been cutting it a certain way, there are some great options out there, and Range Meat Academy and the Art of Beef Cutting are some good resources to get us a little bit more modern in the beef retail. In the meat retail area. I say beef.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I think that's the great approach. You know, like I said, people are looking for this, and you know, our industry So my dad was a butcher all his life. My grandmothers were butchers. My dad was a butcher. It's just in my blood. I mean, I always like to say, look at these paws, right? I had to be a butcher. And, we had a butcher shop when we were a kid, and the rise and fall of that. And, my dad used to break swinging beef, and that was his art. That was his craft. That was his skill. And I'll never forget when he came home and this thing about boxed beef came into our vernacular. And my dad was different after that because his skill was gone. All of a sudden they just told him, open this box and make a slice. And that took something away from him personally. And that really resonated with me. And I like to say my dad was a really good meat cutter, but not such a great business person. and so, being able to provide newer ways to train, Phil, you said it perfectly. People ask me all the time, well, hands-on training. And then I'll get people, well, how many sides of beef am I going to cut? And I'm like, well, this isn't sugar and flour, right?
Yeah.
Not like pastry's not important, but these are large pieces of meat, and being able to, it's highly visual. The courses are all online. They're highly visible. If you love the art of beef cutting, then this is on steroids.
Mhm.
This is like really expanding the art of beef cutting, and then all the other proteins from, what's a cow. And it's just really a neat way for folks. And you know what? It is expensive, right? So why not go through these courses and decide, yeah, I do want to continue this. Or maybe it's like, oh, maybe this isn't my bag. and then you're not investing in, schools. And, I looked around and I just couldn't find anything that out in the industry that was like this.
Mhm.
Of course, there's universities, of course, with meat science programs do a great job. But, this is just for folks that are definitely going into the meat industry. It could work for buyers. There's just, the knowledge in this book is very comprehensive. So if you're an infraspinatus geek, then we have those in there too.
Well,
the LD, as we know.
yeah. Well, and so
We got them all. So
for the hardcore meat nerds out there, you know what we're talking about. For those who are maybe a little bit more removed, Kari's mentioning some of the individual muscle names, but that's what I teach here at the University of Idaho. Is that is we have to learn the basics and the individual muscles, and as soon as we do that, then we can really emphasize the value of the different cuts throughout that carcass. And that's again, that's kind of what the Art of Beef Cutting book does. Range Meat Academy is that visual opportunity. And I really like what you said. Once that's done, once you get the visual stuff done, then you got to get your hands dirty. You got to, well, maybe not dirty, but bloody. And you got to get your hands out there, and you got to go and work alongside as an apprentice with a meat cutter to really truly learn the art, because you can watch art, but then you have to go do it. But it sounds like that's the emphasis of the program, is this is only the beginning, and then we need to encourage you to go out there and learn the rest of the trade.
Yeah, absolutely. That being able, we all teach, we teach in different ways, but, at heart, we're teachers, and being able to, knowing that our folks have kind of done the pre-work and know that you don't have to go over and explain some of the basics, and we can just, remember, fourth and fifth, or, different break points, and then you can really get into it. And then for me, I believe that the students have, Phil, like you said, kind of already in their back pocket, this learning, and it really helps fast track or accelerate, I think, some of the learning process, because they've seen it. I'm breaking beef on a table. I'm showing them, hind quarter, forequarter, and tricking out every muscle possible. So, showing all those unique cuts from the book, and it goes through all of the different, like pork, for example. I show one way to break the hog, however you want to call it, a hog, pork side. But then we take them and show them how to process it into cuts for charcuterie. So you might break the hog differently, because you might want a bigger copa, or you need to cut the leg a little differently because you're going to hang it for a prosciutto. Those kind of things. So it's really, bringing all that old school legacy art and putting kind of this new modern spin on it. And, I mentioned my dad, and, that was kind of the old way of teaching. And so it really inspired me to bring kind of a new way to reach folks, like I said, from the Heartlands to the fields to all over the world. It's just really been a fun ride.
I think this is awesome, and one of the things that you probably know this more than anyone, but so if you look at historically, how you break down a carcass, that hasn't changed a lot. I mean, I think one of the
Right.
the big things, what you're mentioning, the infraspinatus, the fly iron, like when it came, and that transition or that education. So when academia and industry came together, like let's talk to restaurateurs, let's talk to the retailers, how they can utilize this muscle and how to merchandise it. Do you envision in the, I don't know, in this following years that we can do something different with at the beef or pork carcass level? I don't know. It's something like when you say we can't innovate anymore, that's it. Do you think that's a true fact? That's a true statement, or there is some other ways that we can still do some innovation as far as merchandising goes?
Yeah, there's always innovation, right? If we don't stay curious, who wants to get up and go to work or, and not have any curiosity in what you're doing? To me, that's one of the most important things. I think there's other ways to break carcasses that we don't maximize here in the United States. There's, a pistol break for the loin, keeping that loin longer instead of slicing right in the middle and exposing, the ribeye in the loin side. And then there's loss right there because it's exposed to the air and you're going to have to face it, but just keeping that loin all the way through instead of, I understand why we do it because of grading, and I don't know what I'm talking about here, but when we talk about innovation, there could also be innovation that helps us figure out how to add value for marketing the carcasses beyond the yield grades. And the reason why I bring that up is because we're slicing right into the yield grade area just to show that. So if we went to a longer break on the loin where we don't cut it, how do we do that without exposing that? So, there's some challenges, but, I think innovation always has to be there. I think we've probably figured out most of the high valued muscles that we can use to get on the grill and not into a crock pot. I think that part is, there's a few little muscles here and there that we can do, but pork, for example, if you have, let's just say a local fatty hog and it's really beautiful, there are beautiful cuts in the chuck and shoulder, or the shoulder, that we don't really market. The serratus ventralis taken whole out of a nice heritage fatty hog is wonderful. I almost cried when I ate it, but we don't do anything with that. We do sell them as pork butts and we, smoke them and do pulled beef. But oh my goodness, if you could get a hold of those, look what happened with the tomahawk chops. They're everywhere now because industry finally started making available, these long, what are they, like a 109 or something? I forget what the number is, to put that out there. So, the tomahawk chops with pork are already out there, but I think there's a lot of good muscles in the pork side. When you get to the lamb, it gets kind of tiny. So it's kind of harder, to add value. But I think there's some of the learnings, that we've done in the beef industry that can also be applied into the pork side as well.
Well, and this is where taking that historical approach to meat cutting and then looking at how things are done in different countries, because the pistola style cut, exactly what you're talking about, Kari, is ubiquitous. Well, yeah, it's ubiquitous in Europe and in many other countries out there. It's just we have kind of our own our approach to it because of the yield and quality grading that we do here in the United States. Maybe there are technologies out there that could help us so we don't have to make that more destructive cut. Of course, we have some great ways of merchandising those items at the same time.
And one big thing before we move on a different topic, and I think this is important because let's say you go outside of the border, like you start going to South America, Mexico, Central America. There's a lot of plans that they try to do, like merchandise the entire muscle instead of doing ground beef. In the market, if you look at the market for ground beef in those countries, it's not as big as it is in the States. So for here, you get, I mean, for some muscle from the chuck, that you get those muscles, you mentioned the serratus ventralis, you get the supraspinatus. So for everything else, you can turn it into ground beef and you have a good market for it. I mean, I think this is one of the countries that eats a lot of hamburger. I mean, I think top one. But if you start going to different countries, they might not need that much ground beef. So you try to merchandise or commercialize the big muscle. So I think that's also understanding, I mean, where you're at and what muscles can be innovated still or do that. I don't know. I thought that was something to add on your point.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about that, one of the cuts that I believe it's needle. Is it aguja? Do I have that correctly? I don't know. My Spanish isn't that great,
aguja.
But it's basically, yeah. But we don't use that here.
Mm-hmm.
We went back to innovation. We can, go back to our industry partners in different countries and bring some of that value in. Ground beef, there's a value in ground beef, but recognizing that some countries don't like ground beef maybe the way we do. But I tell you what, some of these other, what are they, carniceros? How did I do?
Yeah.
What's a butcher in Spanish?
Carnicero.
But the carnicero. But watching, instead of ground beef, it's like everything is cut really, really thin. And what's ground beef? Something that's been chopped up. But so anyway, but yes, excellent point. And
you're thinking, yeah. I'm not sure if you knew this, but when it all started with the outside skirt, I interviewed in the Spanish one almost 2 years ago. He's the son of the discoverer of the outside skirt. His name is his last name is Cantu, and so back in the 70s, the diaphragm on the outside skirt didn't have value at all. I mean, they were selling it as a gut, as viscera. I mean, along with everything else, it had no value. And that guy, like actually going to the border in Laredo and getting all that outside skirt, and he made a fortune, like merchandising that in a restaurant. And I think it was very funny because at that point he had to make up a name for the outside skirt so no one could know where it came from. So he called it arrachera back in the 70s, and had the privilege to go to school with some of his grandson. And I mean, now, the outside skirts, it's pretty high value cut, but 50 years ago, no one knew about it. And I think this guy opened like 10, 15 restaurants and nobody knew what he was doing. And then I think was the story after the U.S. meat industry kind of noticed this, is like, well, this guy is buying all that outside skirt. Let's put up what's going on. So they started looking at adding more value to it. And nowadays, I don't know what's the pound the price per pound for that muscle, but that's a good example too. As other countries using it, and maybe in the States you don't use it, and vice versa. So
yeah, no, we can break the sirloin a little differently too, and get that better picanha as well. Picanha. We clip that, and it's like, well, you can push that back a little further and get a bigger one. So yeah, back to different ways to break, and just trying to keep innovating and be curious about what we're doing.
Well, and there's so many there are so many opportunities, and that's what I love about meat cutting, and that's what gets me so excited to have folks like you, Kari, out there helping to preach the good word of meat cutting. But and kind of a little bit back to the point where you talked about your father, and when boxed beef really, or boxed meats really started to come on scene. And the art at the smaller local level, it did start to wane. It has come down to a rather critical level, I would say, and why I preach so hard about learning basic meat cutting. I think it's important for most everybody. I think, by the way, I think your Range Meat Academy is a perfect curriculum for FFA organizations and vocational agricultural organizations to get folks who want to learn this but don't know where to begin. And that's what's so cool about this, because yes, anybody could go and get hired at a meat plant right now and still make a pretty good wage, but it may not be in the place you want to live, or maybe you just don't even know where to begin with some of this. And that's what gets me so excited about what you're doing with Range Meat, and then with, of course, the art of beef cutting. So with that, maybe you can talk a little bit about what I just mentioned, but then also maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started and got into where you are now. Chicago.
Right. How did I get there? Going back to agricultural studies, there's obviously agricultural teachers in high schools all throughout the country that are somehow responsible for teaching meats, and they maybe have no clue on how to do that. But, there's tons of agricultural teachers out there that this program can help benefit them too. I'm really excited about linking in more, no pun intended, connecting with more of those folks. It's, I've had chats, like this, podcasts and video casts with a lot of FFA students, and just being able, like you said, Phil, I mean, we're basically kind of devoided the industry of that, meat processor, small skill set, because all those skills move to the center of the country, rightfully so, right? That's where the animals are. We don't want to push bones all over the country. I get it. Bones also is another way to add innovation, because we used to say that.
Well, and I don't want to interrupt you, but you're absolutely right. We the pendulum has swung, and now we need to find that balance again. And I think even in the large metropolitan areas where the meat processors used to be centralized, and then we got very scientific about it and said, let's economize, let's become extremely efficient, and put the plants and the processing in and where most of the livestock are being raised. But then again, that pendulum has started to swing again, where we're starting to get a lot more folks in suburb areas that are just have the interest in agriculture and want to get back into food processing, manufacturing, and do that maybe at a more regional scale. And again, that's where all of this can really come into play. So sorry to keep interrupting. I'm just so excited about it.
That's what's been a big push about this. Honestly, I didn't think whole animal carcasses at a local level would ever come back.
Yeah.
And here we are. So we're bringing it all back. But yes. So yeah, just like you said, everybody's really excited about it. We've got different diets now that also help support meat a little bit differently, instead of it, being deemed as not healthy versus very healthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to that very healthy thing. Some of my earliest memories were getting into my dad's Jeep about 3:00 in the morning. Me and my sister, it was really cold. Jeeps had the plastic sides, and we'd bundle up and my mom would take my dad to work and go to the meat plant. And that was some of my early memories. I mean, going into to the grocery store, we had hanging sides. I mean, the smell of fresh meat, that was unique, these large carcasses. And I was just mesmerized by all this. And, like I mentioned before, my grandmother was a butcher. She, during the Depression, they processed all their animals on farm. My other grandmother and my grandfather had a store called Cavender Markets in South Bend, Indiana. And so she learned from him to cut meat. And it's really neat when I'm going through some of my like my DNA and tracking who my folks are. You can come up with the articles, or meat cutter, butcher, actually can see what their skills are. And so honestly, I started to become a meat cutter for a job. I started cleaning up the meat department in high school. Oof.
Yeah.
Not a sexy
job.
gig in high school, but yeah, but I could go out and have fun on the weekends with my cash. But and then it just kept evolving, and I just really loved the grounding energy around cutting meat. Farmers, ranchers, the whole scale, everybody can go and produce these beautiful animals, transport them correctly, avoid the stress. And then, a meat cutter gets a product and they can just blow right through it and make a cut, and all that work and all that time is just been negated. And sorry, I digressed. But just being able to teach that trend again and coming back down. So I put my way through college cutting meat. So I'm a journeyman meat cutter, and some folks like to call me a master butcher. I've never felt really comfortable with that because there's no governing body that really says, hey, you're a master butcher. Mm-hmm. But that term was floating around with folks that I didn't think were anywhere close to being one. So I'm like, hey, wait a minute. So now I don't mind it so much.
It's like a craft that, can we truly master this thing? I mean, there's so much more. There's so much to learn. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, there is. Anyway, so put my way through college and thought I was done with the knife.
Yeah.
I thought, well, if this gig fails, I can always go back to cutting meat. And sure enough, anybody that's been in the meat business never leaves.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going back to that grounding energy. I look at it like sculpting, and being able to provide those unique cuts and hopefully add value from the producer all the way to the retailer, and having a new cut at the restaurant.
How can folks get a hold of you, Kari? How can they get involved with Range Meat Academy?
Well, the easiest way is just to drop me a line. So Kari, Kari, at Range Meat Academy. That's the simplest way. Visit our website, rangemeatacademy.com. We have a introductory set of butcher knives that, if folks are wanting to get involved and don't want to spend large money. So we've procured some of those sets, and that's on rangemeatacademystore.com. And our whole learning management system is supported by a company called Absorb LMS. And it's a very robust back-end learning management system. So, we can help grocers and retailers wanting to put their staff through the program, individual people that are curious, like we talked about before, junior colleges and workforce development. Mm-hmm. We're just here trying to create more middle skill jobs. And, this isn't a low end wage. This isn't, high end, but, going back to that middle skill wage. So, give me a buzz. You can also contact Ruth at Range Meat Academy as well. And we'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you want to see this thing live, we'd be happy to show you a demo as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kari, again for joining us today. I think I think this was needed. Talking to you, and I guess there's a lot of meat processors that will benefit from this information, and they can directly contact you if they need additional information. You got any last comments, Dr. Bass?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity, and keep keep sharing the good word of meat cutting and the value of meat in diets, and just, it's helping agriculture, especially animal agriculture, and that's my mission in life. So I appreciate what you do.
Right on. I'm right with you. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Kari.